Captain John Miller stood frozen on the bridge of his small ship. Through the main view screen, he watched as the massive Ardaxian warships tore through the Concorde defense fleet. Bright flashes of light marked the death of each Allied vessel. The Battle of Proxima Centauri was not going well. "Captain, we need to leave now," said his first officer, a tall, blue-skinned alien named Vex. "Our orders were clear. If the battle goes badly, we must bring word to the Council." John nodded slowly. His ship, the Olive Branch, was not built for fighting. It was a diplomatic vessel with just enough speed to outrun trouble. Today, that speed might save the future of the Galactic Concorde. "Communications. Send one last message to Admiral Krell," John ordered. "Tell him we're carrying out our mission. Navigation set course for the emergency jump point." As the Olive Branch turned away from the battle, John felt a deep shame. He was running while brave soldiers died, but their sacrifice would be meaningless if no one warned the remaining free worlds. The ship shuddered as its engines pushed to maximum power. Behind them, 3 Ardaxian pursuit craft broke away from the main fleet. "They've spotted us," Vex said, his voice tight with fear. 60 seconds to jump point," the navigation officer announced. John gripped the arms of his command chair. "They won't catch us, not today." The pursuit craft were gaining quickly, their weapons charging. The Olive Branch had no chance in a fight. 30 seconds to jump point. The first enemy shots flashed past their ship, missing by meters. 10 seconds. A blast struck their rear shields, making the entire ship shake. "Jump now." Space twisted around them as the wormhole generator activated. The stars stretched into lines and the ship shot forward into the safety of hyperspace. They had escaped, but only barely. In the quiet that followed, John made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. Set course for Earth. "It's time," we spoke with the humans. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Concorde Council was filled with fear and anger. Representatives from 26 species argued loudly over one another. John stood silently at the center of the chamber, waiting for the right moment to speak. Ambassador Zrenta, a small furry being from the Felorian Republic, finally restored order by banging a ceremonial staff against the floor. "Captain Miller has returned with news from Proxima Centauri," Zrenta announced. "The news is not good, but we must hear it." John stepped forward. "The Ardaxian Empire has defeated our main battle fleet. Admiral Krell and his forces fought bravely, but the enemy's technology was too advanced. Within 3 months, the Ardaxians will reach our core worlds." The room erupted into panic again. "We need to surrender," shouted one representative. "We should run to the outer rim," cried another. John raised his voice above the chaos. "There is another option. We can ask the humans for help." Silence fell immediately. Every alien eye in the room turned to him. Zrenta shook his head. "The humans, they are unpredictable and dangerous. They evolved on a death world with extreme gravity and weather. Their history is filled with endless wars among themselves. We have avoided deep relations with them for good reasons." "And yet," John replied, "those same qualities make them perfect allies against the Ardaxians. Humans are adaptive. They're used to fighting against bad odds, and they hate bullies." "They are isolated," another council member pointed out. "They have shown little interest in galactic politics." "Because we've given them little reason to care," John said. "Show them what the Ardaxians have done to conquered worlds. Show them the slavery, the destruction. Humans have a strong sense of justice. If they see others suffering, they will act." The council debated for hours. Eventually, they reached a decision that few truly supported, but all saw as necessary. They would send a diplomatic mission to Earth to request human assistance. Lieutenant Susan Carter was enjoying a rare day off at her apartment in Washington when her communication device buzzed. She was the human liaison officer to the Galactic Concorde, though most days that meant little more than processing trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. The message was marked urgent. It was from the Concorde's General Secretary. A diplomatic's fleet was approaching Earth with an emergency request. Her presence was required at the United Nations Space Command immediately. 3 hours later, Susan sat in a high-security briefing room with Earth's top military and political leaders. On the main screen, Ambassador Zren-Ta explained the dire situation facing the conquered worlds. The Ardaxians have defeated our strongest forces, the ambassador said. We come to humanity with a humble request for assistance. Admiral William Hayes, the head of Earth's United Defense Force, leaned forward. What exactly are you asking of us, Ambassador? Technical support? Resources? We need your military, Zren-Ta replied simply. We need human soldiers and ships to fight the Ardaxians before they reach our remaining worlds. President Laura Bennett frowned. That would mean war between Earth and this Ardaxian empire. You're asking us to send our people to die for your worlds. I am, Zren-Ta admitted. But consider this. If the Concord falls, how long until the Ardaxians turn their eyes toward Earth? They conquer all advanced civilizations they encounter. It is only a matter of time. Susan watched as the room fell into deep thought. She had studied the reports on the Ardaxian Empire. Their brutality was legendary. Entire species enslaved, planets stripped of resources, resistance crushed without mercy. Show them, she said suddenly. All eyes turned to her. Show them what happens to worlds that fall to the Ardaxians. Ambassador Zren-Ta nodded and transmitted a file to the main screen. What followed was 30 minutes of footage from conquered planets. Concentration camps filled with alien civilians. Automated mining operations run by slaves. Children separated from parents. Entire ecosystems destroyed for resources. When the presentation ended, the room was silent. President Bennett looked at each person present, then spoke quietly. Admiral Hayes, what is your assessment of our military readiness? Hayes straightened. Madam President, the Defense Force is at full strength. Our orbital shipyards have completed, the 7th Fleet ahead of schedule. The new Titan-class battleships have passed all tests. And if we were to face these Ardaxian ships? Hayes smiled slightly. From what I've seen of their technology, we have some advantages they won't expect. They rely heavily on energy shields and laser weapons. Our kinetic rail guns and nuclear torpedoes might surprise them. President Bennett nodded slowly. I'll need to consult with the Security Council, but I believe I know what their answer will be. She turned to Ambassador Zren-Ta. Humanity will not stand by while innocent beings suffer. We will help the conquered fight the Ardaxians. For the first time since entering the room, Zren-Ta showed an expression close to hope. Thank you, President Bennett. But I must ask, what forces can Earth provide? The Ardaxian fleet numbers in the thousands. Admiral Hayes tapped on his tablet. A holographic display appeared showing vast shipyards in Earth orbit, hidden bases on Mars and beneath Earth's oceans, and massive fleets waiting in the shadow of Jupiter. Ambassador, what you've seen of our military so far is just what we keep on display. Allow me to show you what humanity can really do when we go to war. The next few weeks were a blur of activity across Earth and its colonies. Factories that once made cars now built ship parts. Retired soldiers returned to service. Training centers worked around the clock. Earth was preparing for war. Susan Carter watched from a window in the space elevator as it climbed toward Earth Orbital Command. Below her, the Atlantic Ocean stretched out, dotted with massive platforms where warships were being loaded with supplies. Impressive view, isn't it? Susan turned to see Admiral Hayes standing beside her. He wore his full-dress uniform decorated with medals from Earth's past conflicts. Yes, sir, she replied. I never realized we had so many ships hidden away. Hayes nodded. Humanity learned a hard lesson from our own wars. Always be prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. The elevator reached the orbital station. Susan followed Hayes through crowded hallways to a large meeting room, where alien representatives from the Galactic Concord waited nervously. Ambassador Zren-Ta stood as they entered. Admiral Hayes, we have received troubling news. The Ardaxian fleet has increased speed. They will reach Keluthar in 10 days. Keluthar? Hayes asked. Susan answered quickly. The last major manufacturing center of the conquered. If it falls, the Ardaxians will control nearly all shipbuilding facilities in that sector. Hayes frowned. Our main fleet won't be ready for 2 weeks. We need more time. A tall, thin alien with green skin spoke up. Perhaps we could send a small force ahead. Even a few human ships might help Keluthar hold out longer. Hayes considered this. Not a small force. Battle Group 7 is ready now. Captain Frank Rodriguez and the Indomitable can lead the first wave. The aliens looked confused. But that would be only 6 ships against hundreds, Zrenta said. It would be suicide. Hayes smiled. You haven't seen our ships in action yet. 2 days later, Susan stood on the bridge of the UDF Indomitable, Earth's newest battleship. At over 2 kilometers long, it carried enough firepower to level a continent. 5 other ships formed up around it, 3 destroyers and 2 carrier vessels filled with fighter craft. Captain Frank Rodriguez welcomed her to the command center. He was a short man with dark eyes that missed nothing. 20 years in Earth's Navy had left him with a reputation for being both brilliant and unpredictable. Lieutenant Carter, he said, welcome aboard. I hear you'll be our translator and guide to alien customs. Yes, sir, she replied. I've also been asked to explain human tactics to our allies. They seem confused by our approach to warfare. Rodriguez laughed. I'm not surprised. From what I've seen, the Concord fights like it's following a rule book. We're about to throw that book out the airlock. A dozen alien officers had joined the Indomitable's crew as observers. They gathered now for a briefing on the upcoming mission. Susan watched as Rodriguez explained the battle plan. We'll exit wormhole space here, just outside the Keluthar system, he said, pointing to a holographic map. The Ardaxians will have defensive formations set up expecting a direct attack. One of the alien officers, a blue-skinned Tellarite, spoke up. So we will need to find a way through their lines? No, Rodriguez said, smiling. We're going to hit them head-on with everything we've got. Then, while they're focused on us, the Keluthar defense fleet will attack from behind. The aliens looked shocked. A Vexor commander raised his hand. But your ships will be heavily damaged in such an attack. The Ardaxian front line has over 40 capital ships. We're counting on taking damage, Rodriguez replied calmly. Human ships are built with multiple redundant systems. We can lose half our systems and still fight at nearly full capacity. After the meeting, the Tellarite commander approached Susan privately. Your Captain Rodriguez's strategy does not compute with standard military algorithms. It seems chaotic. Susan nodded. Humans embrace chaos in battle. We believe that rigid plans often fail when they meet reality. We prefer flexible strategies that can adapt quickly. And the high risk to your own vessels, your people? We protect our people when possible, Susan said. But we accept that war means losses. The important thing is completing the mission. The alien considered this. It is very different from Concord doctrine. I am curious to see if it works. Battle Group 7 departed Earth the next day. As they accelerated toward the jump point, Susan joined Rodriguez on the observation deck. Below them, Earth grew smaller until it was just a blue dot among the stars. Beautiful, isn't it? Rodriguez said quietly. Worth fighting for. Yes, sir, Susan agreed. But we're not fighting for Earth this time. We're fighting for worlds we've never even seen. Rodriguez nodded. True. But we're also fighting for a principle, that the strong don't get to bully the weak just because they can. That's something humans have believed in for a long time, even if we haven't always lived up to it. The journey to Keluthar took 5 days. During that time, the human crews ran constant drills while the alien observers watched in amazement. Simulated damage would appear without warning, forcing crew members to adapt instantly. Officers would be removed from command, requiring others to step up. Every scenario was designed to create chaos and test flexibility. On the 5th day, as they prepared for the final jump to Keluthar, Susan found the Tellarite commander watching a training exercise. Have you formed an opinion about our methods? She asked him. They are unlike anything in Concord military doctrine, he admitted. Your people deliberately train for failure. You create problems for yourselves. We create opportunities to improvise, Susan corrected. The Ardaxians have never fought humans before. They won't expect what's coming. And what is coming, Lieutenant Carter? Before Susan could answer, alarms sounded throughout the ship. Captain. Rodriguez's voice came over the speakers. All hands to battle stations. We've received a distress call from Keluthar. The Ardaxians arrived early. The planet is under attack now. Susan rushed to the bridge with the Tellarite close behind. Rodriguez was already giving orders as they arrived. Change of plans, he told the command crew. We're jumping in closer than planned, right on top of the Ardaxian rear guard. Navigation, recalculate jump coordinates. Weapons, I want all systems hot the moment we exit the wormhole. Sir, the tactical officer reported, new data from Keluthar shows over 100 Ardaxian ships in the system. We'll be outnumbered, more than 15 to 1. Rodriguez nodded calmly. Then we better make one hell of an entrance. Send word to all ships. Plan Delta is now in effect. The Tellarite looked at Susan in confusion. What is Plan Delta? Susan checked that her safety harness was secure. It means we go in hard and fast, causing maximum damage and confusion. It's what humans call shock and awe. Against a force 15 times your size? It's impossible. Susan smiled grimly. Humans don't believe in impossible. We just haven't found the solution yet. The countdown to jump began. The massive engines of the human ships charged to full power. In minutes, they would arrive at Keluthar, facing overwhelming odds against an enemy that had never lost a major battle. Battle Group 7 is ready, Rodriguez announced. Let's show the galaxy what humans can do. Supreme Commander Vox Thule of the Ardaxian Empire stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching as his fleet bombarded the defenses of Keluthar. Victory was only hours away. The planet's orbital stations were already burning, and their defensive fleet was scattered and broken. Another glorious conquest for the Empire, said his second-in-command, Subcommander Zex. Keluthar will fall by day's end. Vox Thule nodded. The Ardaxians had conquered half the galaxy with their superior technology and tactics. No species had stood against them and survived. The Galactic Conquered was just the latest in a long line of inferior civilizations that would serve the Empire. Report from long-range scanners, Supreme Commander, called out a sensor officer. Unusual energy readings at the edge of the system. Vox Thule turned with mild interest. Concord reinforcements? They are too late. No, sir. The energy signature doesn't match any known conquered vessels. It appears to be wormholes forming, but in a pattern we've never seen before. Now Vox Thule's interest was truly caught. The Ardaxians prided themselves on knowing all possible threats in the galaxy. An unknown ship type was both interesting and slightly concerning. Bring the fleet to alert status, he ordered. Move defensive squadrons to cover our rear. Let's see what comes through those wormholes. The space near Keluthar suddenly tore open as 6 massive wormholes formed. What emerged from them shocked the Ardaxian command crew into silence. 6 warships, larger and more heavily armed than anything the Ardaxians had faced before. Their hulls were thick with armor and bristling with weapon systems. Unlike the sleek, elegant designs of most galactic ships, these vessels looked brutal and purposeful. What species built those? Zax asked, his voice slightly higher than normal. Before anyone could answer, a communication came through on all channels. This is Captain Frank Rodriguez of the United Defense Force vessel Indomitable. We represent Earth and the human systems. Alliance. The Galactic Concord is under our protection. Withdraw from this system immediately or be destroyed. Vox Thule laughed out loud. 6 ships, no matter how large, against his fleet of over 100? These humans were either insane or stupid. Send our reply, Vox Thule ordered. Tell them to surrender or be destroyed like all who oppose the Empire. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Rodriguez received the Ardaxian response. They've refused to withdraw, sir, reported the communications officer. I'm shocked, Rodriguez said with a smile. Weapons target their command vessels, all ships. Execute attack pattern Omega. Let's introduce ourselves properly. Susan Carter gripped her console as the massive human battleship surged forward. The 5 other ships spread out in a formation that looked chaotic to the alien observers, but followed a carefully planned strategy. Are we really attacking their entire fleet? Asked the Tellarite commander, his eyes wide. Not their entire fleet, Susan explained. Just their command and control ships. Cut off the head and the body falls. The Indomitable fired its main cannons. Massive rounds of depleted uranium, accelerated to near light speed, slammed into the shields of an Ardaxian cruiser. The alien vessel's shields flared and failed, and a second volley tore through its hull, splitting it in two. The other human ships opened fire, each targeting a different enemy vessel. Fighter craft poured from the carriers, swarming toward the Ardaxian fleet like angry bees. On his flagship, Vox Thule watched in disbelief as 6 human vessels tore into his perfectly arranged battle formation. Instead of keeping their distance and exchanging fire as any sensible fleet would do, the human ships charged directly into the heart of his forces. "They fight like madmen," Zek said, watching as a human destroyer, heavily damaged by Ardaxian fire, deliberately rammed an enemy cruiser. "They're using kinetic weapons," Vox Thule noted with surprise. "How primitive, yet effective against our shields." The Ardaxian ships had been designed to defend against energy weapons, lasers, plasma, ion beams. Their shields struggled against the massive physical projectiles fired by the human vessels. "Order the fleet to adjust shield harmonics," Vox Thule commanded, "and concentrate fire on the largest human vessel." Dozens of Ardaxian ships turned their weapons on the Indomitable. Energy beams struck the massive battleship from all directions. But instead of breaking apart, the human vessel continued fighting. Ondion. The Indomitable's bridge warnings blared as systems failed across the ship. Decks 7 through 12 reporting heavy damage and called out the damage control officer. Shield generators 2 and 5 are offline. Hull breaches in 3 sections. Rodriguez nodded calmly. "Reroute power from auxiliary systems. Seal off. The damaged sections. Keep our weapons at full power." The Tellarite commander looked at Susan in shock. "Your ship is heavily damaged. In Concord Doctrine, you would retreat for repairs." "Damage was expected," Susan replied. "Our ships are designed to keep fighting even when badly hurt. That's why we build them with so many backup systems." As the battle raged, the remaining defenders of Keluthar noticed the opportunity the humans had created. With the Ardaxian fleet focused on the new threat, the scattered Concord ships regrouped and attacked from the other side. Caught between 2 forces, the perfect Ardaxian formation began to break down. Communication became difficult as human electronic warfare systems jammed their networks. Individual Ardaxian captains, cut off from central command, made their own decisions, further disrupting their carefully planned tactics. 3 hours into the battle, Vox Thule faced an unthinkable situation. 28 of his ships had been destroyed or disabled. The human vessels, though heavily damaged, continued fighting with undiminished ferocity. And the Keluthar defense fleet, which should have been crushed by now, was causing significant damage to his rear guard. "Supreme Commander," Zek said quietly, "perhaps we should consider a tactical withdrawal. We can return with reinforcements." Vox Thule wanted to refuse, to punish such cowardice. But he was a practical commander. This battle had turned against them in a way no Ardaxian could have predicted. "Order the fleet to disengage," he finally said. "We will withdraw to Sector 12 and regroup." As the Ardaxian ships began to pull back, a cheer went up on the bridge of the Indomitable. Despite heavy damage, all 6 human vessels were still operational. "They're running," Rodriguez said with satisfaction. "Not so tough when someone punches. Back, are they?" The Tellarite commander approached Susan, his expression one of amazement. "Your ships are barely functioning, yet you've driven off a fleet many times your size. How is this possible?" "Humans have a saying," Susan told him. "It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog." The alien looked confused. "I do not understand this reference to canines." "It means determination and courage often matter more than numbers or size," Rodriguez explained, joining them. "The Ardaxians may have more ships, but they've never faced an enemy who refuses to give up, no matter the odds." As the last Ardaxian vessels disappeared into hyperspace, messages of thanks flooded in from Keluthar. The planet was saved, at least for now. "This is only the beginning," Rodriguez warned his crew. "The Ardaxians will be back, with more ships and new tactics. They'll try to adapt to our methods." "And we'll be ready," Susan said confidently. With the full human fleet on the way, the next battle will be even more interesting. The news of Battle Group 7's victory spread quickly through conquered space. For the first time in years, hope began to replace fear. The undefeated Ardaxian Empire had finally met its match, and in the depths of space, Admiral Hayes led the main human fleet toward the front lines. Over 200 warships, carrying the full might of Earth's military power. The real fight was about to begin. News of the human victory at Keluthar spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had been preparing for defeat suddenly found new hope. The Ardaxian Empire, unbeaten for centuries, had finally met their match. In the Imperial Palace, on Ardaxia Prime, Supreme Overlord Zaxnar was not pleased. "Explain to me again how 6 ships defeated your fleet," he said, his voice dangerously calm as he faced Vox Thul. The Supreme Commander stood straight, trying to hide his fear. "The human vessels were unlike anything we have faced before. They use primitive kinetic weapons that our shields are not designed to stop, and they fight with no concern for their own survival. So they are savages," Zaxnar said dismissively. "Primitives with strong ships." "No, Overlord, they are dangerous. Their tactics were unpredictable but effective. They targeted our command ship specifically, disrupting our formation, and when damaged, they continued fighting instead of retreating." Zaxnar considered this information. The Ardaxian Empire had conquered hundreds of species, always following the same pattern: show overwhelming force, break their defenses, and accept their surrender. No one had ever pushed back effectively. "These humans are a problem that must be solved," the Overlord finally said. "Recall our fleets from the outer territories. We will gather our full strength and crush this new threat before they can inspire more resistance." Across the galaxy, human ships arrived at Keluthar. Admiral Hayes stepped onto the orbital station where representatives from the Galactic Concord waited anxiously. Captain Rodriguez and Susan Carter stood with them, their uniforms still showing signs of the recent battle. "Battle Group 7 performed admirably," Hayes said, nodding to Rodriguez. "But this was only the first test. The Ardaxians will return in greater numbers." Ambassador Zrenta stepped forward. "Admiral, your ships have given us hope, but the Ardaxian Empire controls vast territories and resources. They will gather a force many times larger than what you faced at Keluthar." "Which is why we won't wait for them to come to us," Hayes replied. "The best defense is a good offense. We're taking the fight to them." The alien representatives looked shocked. "Attack the Ardaxians? No one has ever invaded their territory." "Successfully," Hayes smiled. "Then we'll be the first. But we won't do it through brute force alone. We need intelligence on their key worlds, supply lines, and defensive positions." Susan spoke up. "Sir, I have a suggestion. The Ardaxians have conquered many worlds, but they rule through fear. Those conquered populations might help us if given the chance." "Rebellion behind enemy lines," Hayes nodded. "Excellent thinking, Lieutenant. We'll need small teams to infiltrate Ardaxian-controlled worlds and make contact with potential resistance fighters." "I volunteer to lead one such team," Susan said firmly. Hayes studied her for a moment. "Approved. Select your team members. You'll be assigned our best infiltration ship." 2 weeks later, Susan sat in the briefing room of the stealth vessel Shadow Step with her chosen team. Beside her was Navy SEAL Nathan Reeves, a quiet man with eyes that missed nothing. 5 more Special Forces soldiers completed the group. "Our mission is simple but dangerous," Susan told them, pointing to a holographic map. "We're heading to Ardaxia Prime itself, the center of their empire. Our ship will drop us outside their detection grid, and we'll make our way to the surface, using local transport. Once there," Reeves continued, "we'll contact the underground movements among the conquered species. We'll provide them with communication gear, basic weapons, and most importantly, a plan for coordinated action. The goal," Susan finished, "is to create chaos behind enemy lines when our main fleet attacks. If we can disrupt their communications and supply lines, the Ardaxians will be fighting a war on 2 fronts." Back at Keluthar, the human Concord fleet prepared for the largest military operation in galactic history. Over 200 human warships had gathered, joined by the remaining vessels of the Concorde. Admiral Hayes addressed the combined forces from the bridge of his flagship. The Ardaxians have never lost a war because they've never faced an enemy willing to do whatever it takes to win, he said, his voice reaching every ship in the fleet. They expect us to follow the same rules of engagement as the Concorde. We won't. We'll attack where they least expect it when they least expect it and with tactics they've never seen before. Meanwhile, on Ardaxia Prime, Supreme Overlord Zaxnar reviewed the massive fleet gathered to crush the human threat. Over 500 warships, the largest force the Empire had assembled in generations. The humans showed courage at Keluthar, he told his commanders. But courage means nothing against superior numbers and technology. We will destroy their fleet and then reduce their homeworld to ash as an example to all who might consider resistance. What Zaxnar didn't know was that a small human ship had already slipped past his defenses. Susan Carter and her team made planetfall under cover of darkness using stolen identification codes to bypass security checkpoints. Disguised as traders from an outer world, they moved through the crowded streets of the Ardaxian capital. Around them, members of a dozen conquered species worked as servants and laborers under the watchful eyes of Ardaxian overseers. Look at their eyes, Susan whispered to Reeves as they passed a group of blue-skinned aliens cleaning the street. No one's watching us. They're all looking down, avoiding attention. Perfect breeding ground for rebellion, Reeves agreed quietly. People with nothing to lose make the best fighters. That night, they made contact with their first resistance, Cell, a group of Tellarites who maintained environmental systems in the government district. Their leader, a scarred female named Kira, was initially suspicious of the humans. Why should we trust you? She asked. No one has ever challenged the Ardaxians successfully. Because we already have, Susan told her, showing recorded footage of the battle at Keluthar. 6 human ships drove off an Ardaxian fleet. Now we have hundreds more on the way. Kira's eyes widened as she watched the recording. This is real? Not propaganda? Very real, Reeves assured her. But we need your help to finish what we started. The Ardaxians rule through fear and control. If we break that control in multiple places at once, their empire will crack. What exactly do you want us to do? Kira asked. Susan laid out a datapad with detailed plans. When our fleet arrives, every resistance cell on every Ardaxian world will strike simultaneously. Communication centers, power stations, security headquarters. Anything that helps the Ardaxians maintain control. Kira studied the plans carefully. This could work, but it will mean many deaths among our people. Freedom always comes at a price, Susan said gently. But if we succeed, no species will ever suffer under Ardaxian rule again. As Susan's team spread through the capital, making more contacts and distributing encrypted communication devices, the human Concorde fleet began its advance toward Ardaxian space. Admiral Hayes stood on his command deck, watching as the massive armada moved in perfect formation. Unlike the chaotic approach used at Keluthar, this operation would begin with strict discipline and order. The chaos would come later, when the Ardaxians least expected it. Send word to all ships, Hayes ordered. Operation Thunderbolt begins now. Across the galaxy, the final battle for freedom was about to begin. Human ingenuity and determination against an empire that had never known defeat. The stakes couldn't be higher, and for the first time in centuries, the Ardaxians faced an enemy they didn't understand and couldn't predict, an enemy that didn't know how to give up. The final battle began not with a bang but with silence. Across 100 Ardaxian-controlled worlds, communication systems suddenly failed. Power grids shut down. Security networks went offline. The carefully controlled empire found itself, blind and deaf, if only for a few crucial hours. On Ardaxia Prime, Susan Carter and her team watched from a hidden base as chaos spread through the capital city. For 3 weeks, they had built a network of resistance fighters preparing for this moment. All cells report ready, Nathan Reeves said, checking the encrypted messages on his device. Planetary shield generators will be disabled in 20 minutes. Susan nodded, her face serious. The main fleet should be entering the system now. Admiral Hayes timed it perfectly. At the edge of the Ardaxian home system, the human Concord fleet emerged from wormhole space. Unlike the previous engagement at Keluthar, they faced a prepared enemy. 500 Ardaxian warships waited in defensive formation around their homeworld. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Hayes watched the enemy fleet on the main view screen. "Status report," he ordered. "All ships present and accounted for, sir," his second-in-command reported. "The Ardaxians have positioned their fleet in a standard defensive shell around the planet." Hayes smiled slightly. "And so predictable. Captain Rodriguez, is the Indomitable ready for its special mission?" On a separate screen, Rodriguez nodded. His ship, now repaired and upgraded, waited with a small strike force behind a nearby moon. "Ready, Admiral. The moment their planetary shields go down, we'll make our move." "Perfect. All ships, prepare to execute Battle Plan Epsilon." The human fleet split into 3 groups. Instead of charging forward as the Ardaxians expected, they spread out, forcing the enemy to divide their attention. Fighter craft launched from carrier ships, forming a cloud of small, fast-moving targets. On his command ship, Supreme Overlord Zaxnar watched with growing concern. This was not how battles were supposed to be fought. The humans weren't following any known tactics. "Their fleet is dividing," reported his tactical officer. "They are attempting to flank our position." "Maintain formation," Zaxnar ordered. "Our superior numbers will prevail. Once their main vessels move within range, concentrate all fire on their flagship." But the human ships didn't move within range. Instead, they launched thousands of small objects toward the Ardaxian fleet. "What are those?" Zaxnar demanded. His question was answered when the objects exploded into clouds of metallic dust and small debris, creating a field of radar-reflecting material that blinded Ardaxian sensors. "We've lost sensor contact with 60% of their fleet," the tactical officer reported, panic in his voice. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. Multiple impacts detected across the fleet. "They're using some kind of stealth missiles that our sensors can't track." On Earth's flagship, Hayes watched as confusion spread through the Ardaxian formation. Now, while they're disorganized, all ships advance and engage at will. Fighter groups target their command vessels. The battle erupted into chaos, exactly as Hayes had planned. Human ships darted in and out of the sensor-blocking clouds, firing their kinetic weapons at point-blank range before disappearing again. The rigid Ardaxian formation began to break apart, as individual captains tried to respond to threats they could barely see. On Ardaxia Prime, Susan and her team made their move. Leading a group of resistance fighters, they fought their way into the main shield generator complex. Ardaxian guards fell before them, unprepared for such a bold attack. "Hurry!" Susan called to the Tellarite technicians who followed them. "We don't have much time before reinforcements arrive." Nathan Reeves set charges at key points around the facility, while Susan and the others held off Ardaxian security forces. The fighting was intense but brief. Within minutes, the charges were ready. "Everyone out now," Reeves ordered. "We have 2 minutes before detonation." As they retreated, Susan saw one of their team members fall, hit by enemy fire. Without hesitation, she turned back, lifting the wounded alien onto her shoulders. "What are you doing?" the alien asked weakly. "Save yourself." "That's not how humans operate," Susan replied, running toward safety. "We don't leave our people behind." They barely cleared the complex when the charges exploded. The massive shield generator collapsed in flames, and immediately the protective barrier around the planet began to fail. In orbit, Rodriguez saw the planetary shields flickering. "That's our cue. Strike Force, follow me in. We're going for their government center." The Indomitable and 5 other ships broke from their hiding place, diving toward the planet's surface. Ardaxian defense systems, already overwhelmed by the main battle, could not stop them. As the planetary shields failed completely, Zaxnar realized the true danger. "They're attacking the capital. Redirect our defensive squadrons to protect the palace." But it was too late. Rodriguez's strike force landed troops directly in the government district, linking up with Susan's resistance fighters. Together, they fought their way toward the Imperial Palace. In orbit, the battle had turned decisively against the Ardaxians. Their rigid tactics fell apart in the face of human adaptability. Ships that should have retreated continued fighting, even when heavily damaged. Fighters that should have been easy to destroy proved impossibly agile. "Supreme Overlord," Voxthul reported, his voice shaking. "We have lost over half our fleet. Enemy forces have landed in the capital. The palace defenses are failing." Zaxnar could not believe what he was hearing. The Ardaxian Empire had never known defeat. It was unthinkable. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "We outnumber them. Our technology is superior. Their resolve is stronger," Voxthul said simply. "They fight like nothing I have ever seen." In the Imperial Palace, Susan and Nathan fought alongside Rodriguez's Marines, pushing toward the throne room. Resistance fighters from a dozen conquered species joined them, finally taking revenge for generations of oppression. When they burst into the throne room, they found Zaxnar standing alone. His guards fled. "So," the Supreme Overlord said, looking at the humans with newfound respect and fear, "you have won. Surrender your forces," Rodriguez demanded. "End this war now, or we continue until nothing remains of your empire." For the first time in 1,000 years, an Ardaxian leader spoke the words, "We surrender." The news spread quickly throughout the battle. Ardaxian ships powered down their weapons. The fighting stopped. After centuries of conquest and cruelty, the Empire had fallen in less than a month to a species they had never even considered a threat. Later, on the observation deck of the Indomitable, Susan stood with Nathan and Rodriguez, watching as Concord ships arrived to help establish a new government on Ardaxia Prime. "What happens to them now?" Nathan asked. "Justice, not vengeance," Susan replied. "The conquered species will be freed. The Ardaxians will keep their homeworld but lose their empire. They'll learn to live as equals, not conquerors." Rodriguez nodded in agreement. "Humans didn't fight this war to become the new tyrants. We fought because freedom matters, for everyone." As Earth's fleet prepared to return home, Admiral Hayes joined them on the observation deck. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "the Ardaxians never understood what they were facing. They thought superior numbers and technology were enough to win. They didn't count on human determination," Susan said. Hayes smiled. "Or compassion. Most species would have destroyed them completely. We offered them a chance to change. The stars stretched before them, peaceful now that the threat was gone. The galaxy would remember this day, when the human fleet arrived on the battlefield, and it was game over for the most powerful empire the stars had ever known. Not because humans were stronger or more advanced, but because they refused to accept defeat no matter the odds. That was humanity's true power, and now the galaxy knew it."